Welcome to the Undiscovered Gems podcast, hosted by NBA legend and business powerhouse Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds.
Hi, and welcome to Undiscovered Gems. This is Charles D. Smith. I am the host, and today we have Matt Freeman. Matt is a 20-year industry expert and state and fed injury expert. He spent 20 years at the DOT dealing with enforcement and regulation. Matt is also considered a hazmat specialist. Hazmat stands for Hazardous Materials Specialist. How are you, Matt? Thank you and welcome to the show today.
Hey, doing well. Thank you much. Thanks for having me, Charles.
Good. So, Matt, it's good to have you back. Last time we spoke a lot about a lot of the accidents that happen on the road that you try to prepare both drivers and companies for when it comes to safety.
Yes.
Today, before we start, I'd like to give the audience a little bit about your background. So I'm just going to ask you a couple questions so they get a flavor for who you are before we really jump into some of the questions. So first, Matt, why don't you tell the audience, how did you get into this industry?
Well, my career started out back in 2004 in the enforcement world. Started out on the state side as an investigator, became a hazmat specialist for the state. From there, I went over to the federal government with Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, FMCSA. Became a hazmat specialist then. Once I got out of there, I continued my career, started my own company, and we've been going strong ever since January 1, 2018. So we've been doing it for a little bit of time now. Have built a great team of industry experts, state and federal retired experts in the enforcement and DOT arena on hazmat and everyday transportation regulations.
Right. And I think with all the drivers out there on the highways and byways, you don't tend to think about the truckers' training. Obviously, we have accidents that unfortunately happen every day. We have a lot of motorists that are literally afraid to drive by trucks in 2 and 3 lane highways. But there's people like you that make sure that the companies and the drivers are trained for safety to eliminate and cut down a lot of those accidents that happen out there on the road. So, Matt, one of my questions that I have for you kicking off is, what is the difference between your training with the company and the individual who's behind the wheel?
Well, a couple things here. One of the things is we want to make sure the company's aware, being safe. And all companies do. I haven't met a company that doesn't want to be. But we want to let them know that what we can do for their drivers. We don't only just want to train the drivers, but we want to train the folks who are over the drivers, the dispatchers, the fleet managers, along with the drivers, because we want them to know on a daily what they need to do to be safe out there on the roads. And, part of that is preparing themselves for a pre or post-trip inspection. And not only that, but, for roadside. What to expect on the roadside when they get pulled over. It's not always a bad thing, but you never know what they're going to find until that inspection is being conducted. And what we try to do is prevent any defects or anything found in those trucks. So we want to train those drivers so they're doing those pre-inspections and making sure that they're being safe on the road. And, for a company aspect, the safer the trucks and the less defects that are discovered on those trucks, because they are being looked at on a regular basis, is better for the carrier itself, the company, because then those violations don't go against the company. So that's what we're there for, to eliminate the violations and to train these guys to make sure they're looking for the things that they need to look for to be safe. And like you said, there are people out there who are afraid to drive by big rigs, regardless if it's a hazmat tank, transporting chemicals, or a box trailer that you see every day transporting, our goods from store to store. our goal is to make sure to consult and train our customers on the things that they need. Coming in and doing a compliance assessment. Let's see where you are. You don't know till you get there, and sometimes companies, don't know where they really are unless someone's digging in and telling them. Because you get complacent. You're doing the same thing every day, and until something happens, you don't realize if there's anything being done wrong.
Right, right. With the you mentioned being pulled over, and you go through an inspection. One, let's just say there's a reason why the driver gets pulled over, but I want to stay with the company before we get to the driver. Now you go through an inspection. What are they looking for when it comes to inspecting the entire rig, the truck? What are they looking for? What's the inspection like?
Sure. There's a process of inspections that they go through. There's different levels. Typically, they'll do what they call level 1 inspection. Okay. And what they do is that's part of that is the driver. They're getting all the information from the driver. They're looking at logbooks. Okay. And they're making sure that the logs are matching up with what they're doing on a daily, from where they're going from point A to point B. So they look at that. They're also looking at your general safety requirements on a vehicle, making sure the lights are working, making sure the brakes are good, making sure the tires are good, the wheels. So they're going through a full inspection process on the roadside. So some of these things has to do with weight. Okay, they have portable scales, or they're going through scale houses, and they're making sure that they're not overloaded, that they are at the appropriate weight that they're required to be at. So those are things that it come back on the company side. When these trailers are leaving the facility, they need to make sure that they're not overloading these trucks. The driver's not going to know that till he gets down the road. Now if he does, I'm not aware of that. But when they're loading these trucks, they're just pulling the trailer.
Right.
They're usually hook and go. It is the driver's responsibility to check that trailer before it pulls off, make sure everything is safe, everything's working. So those are some of the key things that go back on the company, before it takes off. Because no matter what, even if whatever the driver does, it reflects back on the company itself. That's the key thing there. It's always going to reflect back on that company. So it's you have some drivers, that if I've heard in my past say, hey, you know what, I'm not getting the ticket. So if it's in bad shape, it's in bad shape. But there's a lot of very responsible drivers out there, and those are, I'm just talking a worst case scenario. But what we try to get for folks to understand on both the driver and the company side, those points and penalties add up, and even though it's not hitting the driver, it's still hitting the company, and that company's one that has to fork out those fines or penalties. And if there's too many added, that company has a decision to keep that driver or not. That's up to that company, on how they take care of it. And so on the company side, coming back and seeing how well they take care of their vehicles, their trailers, that makes a big difference. And now it comes down to the maintenance side of it. Being safe. That's what we're here to make sure folks are doing, and that I assist in any way we can.
So let's just say the truck is overweight, and the driver's hauling a load, and he didn't know it was overweight. What happens? Are they grounded? What do they need to do to get back out on the road? How does that work out?
If it's going through a scale house, it's going to be determined up to that scale when they determine that weight. Okay, so the key thing is it can't go down the road overweight. So I'm just going to give an example of some things that could happen. Okay, the company may have to bring in another truck to offload some of that weight, put it on another truck. It would more likely be deemed out of service where it can't move any farther, so they won't have a choice but to transport product. So it just kind of depends on what the company wants to do. But the truck will not be able to go down the road overweight per state regulations. So.
Oh, wow. Wow. Didn't understand that. So now, on the driver side, when we talk about, again, I'll go back to a spot check, getting pulled over. You mentioned logging hours. Um, we talk about drivers being tired. And that, let's just say that is that why you look at the hours, because you're seeing at the beginning, or is it the truck hours? What do you mean by logging hours?
Sure,
That'll lead to my next.
sure, it's the driver hours. They're looking. One of the things they look for is fatigue. Okay, a driver is allowed to have 11 hours of drive time and 14 hours on duty. So, what they want to make sure they're not driving over those hours. Okay, and when they are driving those hours, are they taking enough time off? And we're talking over the road drivers. Okay, they can have a 10-hour break if they once they hit 11 hours to reset to go to the next day to start driving again. Okay, so those are things they look at on the logs. They're also looking for falsifications. Making sure that they're doing what they say they're doing. And for instance, if you show a stop and it's a 3-hour trip and you made that trip in 2 hours, did you really make that trip in 2 hours? Okay, just as an example on something like that. So they're looking at those kind of things, looking at deficiencies on the logbooks from the drivers. Make sure they're doing their pre and post trip inspections because they're looking at the previous 7 days. So they're counting up, and they're looking at their 60 and 70-hour rule violations, which means they only allowed to work 70 hours in an 8-day period and 60 hours in a 7-day period. So it all comes down to hours and how long they're working, fatigue, potential falsification, things like that.
So, Matt, when they're logging the hours, is this something digital? Is it handwritten? Who logs the hours? How do you know?
Sure. Depending on the exemptions that are out there, some may be on a logbook page, just a paper page. The standard is over the road drivers will in interstate commerce on an everyday basis will be on an ELD, electronic logging device, which will record all their time while the vehicle is moving, and so depending on how they're set up, when the vehicle starts up, that's when everything starts kicking in on those devices. There's different devices out there, but they're all regulated by the DOT and have to be approved through the DOT. So those devices are going to keep track of their time. They're also going to have built-in GPS, so it's going to show them where they're at all times. And that's where sometimes when you're going back and comparing where they're at and what they're showing, they're going to be able to log in, log out on these devices. They're also going to be able to record their pre-trip inspections, the walk-around inspections, and their post-trip inspections on these devices. So it is a requirement by the federal government that these guys have a EOD in all their vehicles.
Now, dealing with the driver themselves, just obviously just talked about hours, so there's not fatigue. You might have one driver that can't do more than 5-6 hours. You have one driver that can go over 11 hours based on their endurance, their physical condition. Does that come into play, or is the set standard regardless?
It's a set standard. It's across the board. And we're just talking your everyday truck driver, rules for transportation. It's 11 and 14 hours. There's other rules that come into play depending on what they're driving. Okay, so there are some exceptions there, but that's your standard every day. You still have to have a 10-hour break to reset. That they have different types of sleeper berth, on duty, off duty times. that accrue into that, for the braking periods.
Hmm.
So it's this has been around for a long time.
Right.
The electronic logging devices, have done away with most of the paper. Now, if you are a local driver and you stay within 150 air mile radius, say you're just working a certain area, for your daily, then you may be on a time card. Okay, you don't have to be on a logging device as long as you stay within that 150 air mile radius. So, there are some exceptions to the logbooks, and that's
Sure.
one of them. But all the rules still apply. And there's
Hmm.
certain things, certain hours after they hit a certain amount of time, they will have to go into a logbook. So there's rules to your local drivers somewhat versus your over the road everyday interstate drivers.
Right. Right. Now, with the fact that the drivers themselves uh, have to be trained, how often do they have to? Is it an annual training that they have to go through every year, every 6 months? How often do they have to come back and be questioned and check their uh, their endurance, how they are as drivers, a new exam? How often do they have to do this stuff?
So there's two ways to look at the training. You have the mandated regulatory training, okay, which is if you're a hazmat employee and you're a hazmat driver. So if you're driving hazardous materials, for example, those drivers have to have training within the initial 90 days of starting a new job function. So as soon as they get into it, okay, for example, and a minimum of every 3 years to do a recurrent training, a refresher training. That's mandated, okay, if you're transporting hazardous materials. Uh, on the non-everyday, non-hazmat, your groceries, your carrying wood to the different locations of lumber, whatever it may be, your everyday freight. There's no mandate on training for them.
I see.
So that's where we come in and we offer the additional training that the drivers may not be getting. Um, and
Right.
again, we want to be one step ahead, not two steps back. That's a motto we follow. And the more training you can give somebody, we've learned that really, makes them pay a little bit more attention. Sometimes someone might say, I was never told that.
Hmm.
If they were or not, we're here to reassure that, hey, this is what the regulations are. And we don't want, we want people to be comfortable when they get stopped. If they're going through a scale house, if they're getting pulled over, um, you know, I'm, I can see both sides here. I understand no one wants to get pulled over, irregardless if it's a nice stop. Everything's because time is money and money is time when you're in trucking. If you're not moving, the company's not making no money. And so
Right.
I used to scuba dive, and time is air, air is time. You run out of air, you run out of time. You're not getting nowhere. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, with that, we try to make sure the drivers are comfortable with how to go through the roadside inspection. We train them on what they're going to look for and what to expect. And there's certain things that they need to know. So let's say an officer cites something that's wrong. Okay, it happens. They need to know what to do. And,
Right.
there's certain things what they call a data queue. Uh, where they can challenge that discrepancy. And sometimes they win, sometimes they lose, but it's our job to say, hey, this is the time and place to see where we can get that fixed. And
Sure.
that's what we train these drivers to do and how to do these inspections. Um, I've seen a lot of craziness, in my enforcement day. Um, so when I come back and I have a lot of family who drove trucks, in my past family. So I can look at it both sides. I understand, you know, uh,
Hmm.
what not to do, what to do, what you want to get away with, you know, as little as possible, so I can get into, But we let them know. Here's the way I look at it: is my family, your family, our friends drive these roads every day. I know I couldn't live with myself if I let something go down the road that I inspected and missed something. And because who's it going to hurt? It's going to hurt me worse than anybody. And I even tell a driver that, you're pulling these big 80,000-pound vehicles down the highway. If something happens and you miss that, can you live with yourself? But it's not just that, but you got to think about the safety of others. It may or may not be your fault when that incident happens, but that's still an 80,000-pound rig and trailer that's going down the road. And, so we try to let these guys know what to think about, what to look at. Don't get complacent. Make sure you're not just checking a box. You're physically viewing and seeing what you're looking at, not just, doing the checks and balances.
Right. Now, I would think someone of your expertise, Matt, with a lot of the different unfortunate accidents that do happen, have you ever been brought into court to kind of be an expert at what you do in evaluating and analyzing an accident that took place? Have you ever been in that situation?
I've never had to go to court on any accidents. I have been asked more than once for my expertise.
Sure.
On assisting where they should take things, how they need to go look at it. Our company will assist, as expert witnesses and things, when asked. We have a whole team here who can assist on those. So, those are always hard.
Mm-hmm.
And, even when you work something after the fact, unless you have evidence of what actually happened, you're given your best opinion of
Right.
what the rules and regulations, if anything has been broken.
Right. Talk about the laws a little bit. What are some of the nuances to the laws that have some law changes that have taken place over the last 5 years or so, or over the last decade? I mean, different laws that were impactful for public, and you look at it and you say that law was needed. But talk about some of the things that you've seen over the past 5 to 10 years where you actually complemented the law, and then talk about something that maybe they should have left it the same as it should have been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's two things that stand out that has been both rules in the regulations and now more enforced per the regulations. You have all these laws, but what's being enforced out of the laws? Okay. So one of the big things that comes to mind, one's on the drivers and one is on the equipment, your trailers. The rear end protection has always been in the regulations. Okay. There's a rule, part of it's called wheels back in those regulations. So what that is the reason that's come into play is the bumper in the back of the trailer. Now, because depending on where the wheels are set on that trailer, you have what they call wheels back. So if they're within 12 inches of that bumper, you're okay. Okay. So what they've done with that rule is basically because of all the rear impact collisions and things, depending on how the trailer is set up with the axles and the wheels, they may have to have another bumper on there, a stronger bumper on there. Okay. And these bumpers are required to take so much force. Okay. Now that is always been in the regulations, the rear end protection. Now this regulation has been put in an annual inspection. They went from a 14-point inspection to a 15-point inspection. So now when these trucks go in annually, to be inspected,
Mm.
just like you would take your car in to have it before you get your driver's, your license and stuff. It's the same concept. The trucks and trailers, all commercial motor vehicles, have to go in for an annual vehicle inspection. And now that one has been added to that annual inspection. So when these trucks and trailers come in, specifically the trailers, they have to check for wheels back, the rear end protection, make sure it's got the appropriate. So that's something that's being more enforced now. Not that it never was before, but now it's actually on the inspection form. Okay.
Oh.
So that's something I think is a good thing. Some of those things I think maybe they should have always been there, but it always takes incidents to happen before people start enforcing more things. It's just we're kind of a reactive, country on that part of it. But on the driver's side of it was what we were just talking about a while ago. The drivers are required to do a daily vehicle inspection every day.
Mm.
Okay, you have a pre and a post trip. What they changed is now they're only requiring them on their daily vehicle inspection report. Their post trip is to only fill it out if they see deficiencies, and then they turn it in. Before, they were required to turn one every day. And because of the Paper Reduction Act, this was all part of the Paper Reduction Act, is they then set it to where they only have to do them when they see a defect. So what happens? The reason they did that was because so many drivers, out of habit, were not doing their post-trip inspections.
Mm-hmm.
A post-trip inspection is a walk around making sure everything is right. I don't know how many times I was sat in an office when I used to wear that enforcement hat and watch drivers just walk in and fill out the paperwork and drop it on the desk and leave. And I'd be like, "Hey, what you filling out?" I would ask them. "Oh, just my paper." They wouldn't know who it was. And
Right.
You go to look and I watch them. They're filling out their daily vehicle inspection report, and they never even did a walk around, never looked at anything. So you get a lot of pencil whipping.
Right.
Frank. And so because of a lot of that, that's where they put that into the Paper Reduction Act. So now they only required to turn them in when they see defects. The other thing to go with that is, so how do you know if all these guys are just not turning them in? When are they required to turn it in? Okay, I'm going to talk about a tidbit here.
Right.
So if they get a roadside inspection, and that roadside finds, let's say there's 5 defects that he finds, the officer. So guess what? At the end of the day, guess what that driver is supposed to do?
What's that?
Fill out a post-trip inspection showing that there were defects discovered that day. So whenever an enforcement person would come in to do an audit or an investigation on the company, and they're looking at that vehicle, they're going to ask for the previous 90 days. Record keeping for a post-trip inspection is 90 days. So if there's any roadside inspections during that 90-day period, they're going to be asking for, hey, where's his daily, inspection? Mm-hmm. That's how they're going to determine now if they were required to do it or not. So, and that's just one of the ways. So that's where, that comes into the investigative side of it, when you have enforcement inside, doing reviews on the company. So there's the different effects that you're seeing with some of the changes that they're doing. But with the training and the consulting that we do, it comes back to say, hey guys, don't get complacent. Make sure you're doing this, because let them know if the roadside does something. Well, why do I have to do it? He already gave me the inspection report. This is what the rules are. So there's a
Matt,
for that.
Yeah, just looking at the time, even the first time we spoke, time just kind of sailed right by, and I'm like, oh wow, it's already time for us to depart. Look, your information is second to none, man. I mean, anybody who looks at this show and is a concerned driver going up down the highways, pulling next to a truck that's carrying hazardous materials, you've definitely lessened their load and their mindset, put at ease, understanding that your work behind the scenes is very valuable. You guys are doing a tremendous job. I want to thank you for being on the show. Look forward to hearing more about this in the future. And again, it's been a great show. Thanks for attending, Matt.
Hey, thank you so much, Charles. Thank you for having me again, and I look forward to coming back.
All right.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Undiscovered Gems with our host, Charles D. Smith, highlighting today's best and brightest business minds. Brought to you by Pods Entertainment Group.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, I mean, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.